You have to be careful to just not play essentially a 100% strategy in spots like this, and especially if you're playing heads up against a world-class player like Doug Polk. Hello everyone, I am Jonathan Little. We are back with another hand from the 200-400 Heads Up Battle Royale featuring Doug Polk and Daniel Negreanu. It's a close match so far. The players are battling it out. I'm excited to see how it continues playing out. And today we have a 200 big blind deep hand where two pre-flop hands get in there and battle. We have a raise from Doug Polk with jacks. We have a 3-bet from Daniel Negreanu with ace-king. A 4-bet from Doug Polk with the jacks. A 5-bet from Daniel Negreanu. Back around to Polk. Interesting spot. I think calling's probably the right play. He could certainly jam, but I think calling's probably fine, and that is what he does. Flop comes 9, 7, 2. Before we get to the flop action, I want to tell you about something that I'm doing very special for all of you. It's a secret, though. Don't tell anybody else. Mr. Editor, tell them how we're giving away everything.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Hello, I am Jonathan Little. I'm a professional poker player with over $7 million in live tournament earnings, including 2 World Poker Tour titles. I'm the author of 15 best-selling educational poker books, and, more importantly, I have coached thousands of students to succeed at poker. And whenever students come to me for the first time, very often I see them making the same mistakes over and over. And that's why I created PokerCoaching.com. Sign up to PokerCoaching.com right now with a completely free membership, and you will be coached by elite pros. And you will also learn how to play a good, strong, fundamentally sound strategy. We also have thousands of practice hands and quizzes where you will be able to play a scenario and then hear, right after it, how a world-class pro would play that exact same situation. And you'll also meet a vibrant community of other poker players who are actively striving to improve their skills. By studying at Poker Coaching, you will know the right play to make in the vast majority of situations you encounter at the poker table. So, for a few days, what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer you Poker Coaching Premium, which normally costs $99 per month, completely for free. No credit cards required or anything like that. I want you to be able to try out the site, use our mobile app, and see everything that Poker Coaching Premium has to offer. So, sign up for a free account to PokerCoaching.com today. All right, are you back? I'm excited for this. Make sure you check out PokerCoaching.com/all-access. I make a lot of material for you, and I want to make sure you make the most of it. So make sure you take advantage of the all-access pass. All right, on the flop, Daniel Negreanu opts to check. How does the solver feel about the check? What do you think? Well, in this scenario, solver actually recommends a decent mix of going all in for 93% pot, and a little bit of checking, which, is fine. You're gonna find that in these scenarios, from out of position, basically every time the solver is gonna recommend a pretty mixed strategy, which is kind of hard for us mere humans to implement. In this scenario, notice the solver's betting and checking every hand some portion of the time. The only hand it's betting like every time is queens, right? And even then it still checks it every once in a while. This is the tough thing about trying to replicate GTO, because like let's say you always bet queens, queens, jacks, kings, aces, and ace-king offsuit. Like that's going to be pretty close to GTO, but not quite there, right? And that's going to result in your ranges being slightly off. It is worth noting that it's kind of difficult to know if these ranges are even what the players get to the flop with, because I'm not sure exactly how much they've studied 200 big blind deep 5-bet pots, right? Because like let's say instead of having whatever percentage of ace-queen suited this is, let's say 15%, they actually have 30% or 50%. Or 0%, right? That's going to change the solver's output substantially. And you want to make sure that you do your best to try to actually assess your opponent's pre-flop strategy and adjust accordingly. So anyway, this time Daniel Negreanu does check, and now Doug Polk goes for a pretty standard bet, I think. He does go for the small bet with the pocket jacks. Take a look at the solver. Solver loves a small bet with the pocket jacks. Kind of interesting to see kings and queens are checking. Aces bets mostly, tens bets mostly. You may be a little bit surprised to see these hands betting. A lot of people think in this scenario that if you bet and get called with jacks or tens, you don't especially love it. But you have to realize a lot of Negreanu's checking range is going to be hands worse than jacks, so you want to be betting and getting money in the pot. You may say, why doesn't Polk just jam it all in? Because if he jams it all in, then Negreanu now has just like really easy folds with a lot of his unpaired hands. And essentially it's going to force him to play reasonably well. So against the small bet we see here, Negreanu should call with, of course, all the better hands, but also ace-king has to stick around, which is in pretty marginal shape a decent amount of the time. Also tens has to stick around, which is in terrible shape, right? Interesting to see Negreanu should be check shoving with ace-king offsuit sometimes. That also seems pretty aggressive, but if you think about his shoving range to check shove, it's aces, kings, queens, jacks, and then whatever bluffs he can find. And the bluffs he can find here, turns out, are ace-king, because those have the most equity against random pocket queens, jacks, tens, etc. that, you know, Polk definitely could have in this scenario. So this is a spot where Negreanu should at least consider going all in. And so far, notice that on the flop, Negreanu should be betting this ace-king offsuit about half the time. Oh, so here it is, about half the time. And then facing a bet, he should be raising it about half the time. So we're already in this kind of a rare scenario where Negreanu has not played by the solver, and therefore you have to be a little bit careful looking at the straight GTO solution. That said, Negreanu's also played by the solver. I mean, this is the tough thing about looking at solver analysis, because Negreanu check calls flop, and that's what the solver does. You know, 25-ish% of the time when it has ace-king. So you can't say he's necessarily making an error, but assuming he does this every time, he is making an error. And I don't know exactly how Negreanu's playing this scenario, but you have to be careful to just not play essentially a 100% strategy in spots like this, and especially if you're playing heads up against a world-class player like Doug Polk. All right, he does check call. Turn is a 7. Negreanu checks, and now it is on Doug Polk. What do you think you should do here? Take a second, think about it. Type your answer in the comment section below. Should he check, bet tiny, like 15,000, or should he go all in? Go ahead, do it. I'll wait a second. All right, you did it, you committed. It's very important to make sure when you're going through quizzes like this or hand histories like this that you commit to an answer. I actually make you do that at pokercoaching.com in the quizzes. You have all access from November 16th to November 20th, so make sure you get in there and binge the quizzes. You might as well. We have over 1,000 of them. You're going to learn a ton if you do that. All right, after Negreanu checks a turn, Doug Polk has an easy all-in, but he checks. Why is he checking? Maybe he thinks Negreanu's getting tricky and trappy. Let's see what the solver recommends in this scenario. Doug Polk's turn strategy, pocket jacks, all in every time. All in basically every time. And that's because here, if Negreanu does have tens, he's going to call it off. And if he has like ace-king, he's in a pretty miserable scenario. Now, of course, Negreanu does have some aces here, but notice a lot of the aces check raised, right? So what does Negreanu's turn check calling range mostly look like? It's mostly ace-king, which you don't care if that folds. Ace-queen, you don't care if that folds. King-queen, you don't care if that folds. Pocket tens, which will call, that's great. And pocket aces, which will call, so you know, that's marginal. So basically by jamming, you get ace-king and ace-queen to fold the majority of the time. Or if they decide to call it off, that's okay too, because those are well behind, right? So this is a spot where, assuming Negreanu plays this strategy on the turn, Polk should be jamming. Or if Negreanu plays this strategy on the flop, Polk should be jamming the turn. But Negreanu may not be playing that strategy, right? I would actually venture to say, though, if anything, Negreanu's turn range may be even a little bit weaker if he check calls stuff like ace-king a little bit more often, and he may also not bluff that on the river. Therefore, Polk probably should be even more inclined to bet the turn. But for some reason, he checks. You know, I've been saying so far throughout all these videos, it seems like Doug Polk is playing very much by the solver. Maybe he's playing by the solver, just assuming different ranges for Negreanu, right? That could certainly be the case, or assuming different tendencies for Negreanu. And that's the tough thing about analyzing these hands, because I'm not fully aware of the dynamic of the match. I haven't watched every single hand that's been played, and I don't specifically remember what happened the previous 30 hands, right? So it's a tough spot to analyze, but if we're just straight up looking at GTO versus GTO, this is a very easy all-in on the turn. This time, goes check, check. The river maximally punishes Doug Polk. The ace comes. Negreanu opts to check. How do we feel about this? Feels like a spot where betting seems reasonable to me. Let's see. Here we go. Yep, and as we see, Negreanu very often should be betting in this scenario just because he has the nuts, right? He essentially has the super nuts. And if you look at the bet size that's used, you may think, oh, all in's the only option. But look at this. Solver actually bets 10% pot. This is something I think a lot of people don't fully recognize, that we're playing no limit hold'em here, not half pot or all in or 3/4 pot hold'em. You can use whatever bet size you want. And in this scenario from out of position, you're going to find that on the river, the solver almost always uses primarily a giant bet size, in this case all in, and a tiny bet size. And this is a very, very common situation. Typically when you're on the river, very often you want to be betting small with your strong value hands that can still get called by worse hands. Like right here, right? If ace king jams all in, what's he getting called by? Is jacks and tens really calling? Like, maybe not, right? But if he bets tiny, it puts them in a miserable spot and they're probably going to find calls sometimes. So whenever you're in this scenario, you're going to find that the solver often structures the giant bet size to be the super nuts and some bluffs, as we see here. Aces for the super nuts, king, queen offsuit for the bluffs. And the small bet size is structured with decently strong value hands that are not the nuts, but are still almost certainly good, like ace, king, and ace, queen, and a few bluffs as well, as we see the king, queen's bluffing here. And then the checking range is structured as hands that are sometimes check calling, sometimes check folding, like right here. Tens is going to check fold the river. Ace, queen, and ace, king are going to call. Kings, yuck. I'm not sure what kings do. But then you also want to make sure you're protecting your checking range with a little bit of nut hands. Kings probably folds. Not entirely sure, though. Anyway, aces obviously check calls. So essentially we're going to have three ranges on the river in Negreanu's shoes. We're going to have a giant betting range that is very polarized, super nut hands and nothing. Then we're going to have a tiny bet size of very strong but non-nut hands and some bluffs, plus a tiny bit of nuts, as we see. Aces does bet a tiny bit at the time here. And then we're going to have a checking range that includes some hands that can win at the showdown. Notice here, tens, kings can win at the showdown, right? But if you check and your opponent jams, then they probably don't win and you can fold, as well as some hands that are also check calling, plus also some nuts for protection as well. So that's how, from out of position, the vast majority of the time when it goes check, check on the turn, that is how you're going to be structuring your range. So anyway, he decides to check. On the river, what should Polk do? Now jacks has no merit in betting at all. Notice Polk doesn't even have any jacks, but if he had tens, which is kind of a comparable hand at this point, you see tens checks basically every time. And Polk's river strategy, notice he also uses a 10% pot bet sometimes. In this scenario, using roughly the same strategy, right? All in with the nuts, ace, king sometimes, and aces. Also all in with some bluffs, king, queen suited. Small betting mostly with ace, king, and some ace, queen when he is betting, right? Plus a few bluffs. And checking with hands that are probably good, but if you bet and get called, you're very unhappy, like kings, tens, and perhaps like ace, jack suited. So in this scenario, Polk just has an easy check if he does have this hand. It does go check, check. And Negreanu's Koopa Loops, a nice pot by getting there on the river. Fun hand, right? Poker's interesting when you're playing these weird corner cases. So that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, make sure you check out the All Access Pass to Poker Coaching Premium. It costs you $0. If you like this content, if you're here, you are going to love the All Access Pass to Poker Coaching Premium. Make sure you check that out at pokercoaching.com/all-access from November, 16th to the 20th. I think that's right. All these dates flying around in my head. If you enjoyed this video, click like, click subscribe, I would appreciate it. Also, there's a notification bell. That way, you know every time I post a new video. That way you don't have to keep coming back to YouTube and refreshing every 5 hours. It'll notify you, so make sure you click the bell as well. Hope you have a great, great day. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I realize you could be watching lots of content and you chose to watch mine. So thank you. I appreciate you. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.